You know that person who says, yeah, maybe, to every invite and then quietly never shows up? The one with a fresh excuse every single weekend? Yeah, they're not flaking on you. They're choosing something most people don't have the language for. And honestly, they might be onto something the rest of us keep ignoring. If a quiet evening at home sounds better to you than any party invitation ever could, welcome. You're about to feel very understood. Today we're getting into the psychology of people who genuinely prefer being home. The ones the world calls boring, but science calls something else entirely. So let's get into what's actually happening under the surface, because there's real neuroscience behind this, and it starts with how your brain processes the world around you. Some people walk into a room full of strangers and their entire system lights up. Dopamine floods in, energy rises, they feel alive. That's the extroverted brain doing what it does best, feeding off external input. But there's a whole other group of people whose brains operate on completely different fuel. For them, social environments don't energize, they extract. Every conversation, every interaction, even the enjoyable ones, pulls from a reserve that only gets replenished one way, alone, in a space they control, surrounded by quiet. There's a concept in psychology called optimal arousal theory. And it basically says every human brain has a threshold for how much stimulation it can take in before things stop feeling fun and start feeling like work. For people who love being home, that threshold sits lower than average. Not because something's wrong with them, but because their nervous system is wired to absorb more per interaction. They're not underperforming socially, they're over-processing environmentally. And that distinction matters more than most people realize. But it goes beyond just how much stimulation your brain can handle. There's a deeper layer here that researchers have started paying serious attention to. People who gravitate toward home often have what's known as sensory processing sensitivity. About 1 in 5 people carry this trait. Their brains don't just register what's happening around them. They analyze it, store it, cross-reference it against everything they've ever experienced. A single hour at a dinner party isn't just a dinner party. It's hundreds of micro-observations running at the same time. Facial expressions, tonal shifts, background noise, the energy between two people who clearly just had an argument but are pretending they didn't. Their system is capturing all of it in high definition, while everyone else is barely paying attention. And you know what that actually looks like in real life? It's that moment where you're at a gathering and you notice the host is exhausted behind their smile, while everyone else is grabbing another drink. It's reading the room before you've even sat down. And then wondering why nobody else seems to see what you're seeing. That's not overthinking. That's your hardware running a program most people's brains don't even have installed. Here's the part that doesn't get enough credit, though. That quiet time at home isn't empty. It's not wasted. Neuroscientists have found that introverted brains show heightened activity in the prefrontal cortex during periods of solitude. That's the region responsible for deep thinking, planning, and creative problem solving. So while it looks like they're doing absolutely nothing on that couch, their brain is running a full operation, connecting dots, processing the week, building ideas internally that most people would need a brainstorming session and 3 whiteboards to even begin approaching. And this shows up in the research over and over. Breakthrough ideas don't usually emerge in group settings. They happen in showers, on solo walks, at 1 a.m. when you're the only person awake in the house and your mind finally has enough room to go somewhere interesting. History's most original thinkers were notorious for seeking out isolation. That pattern isn't some quirky coincidence, it's neurological. Now let's talk about the cultural piece, because this is where it gets genuinely frustrating. We live in a world that treats going out as the default setting for a good life. Social media is filled with crowded rooftop bars, weekend getaways, group photos where everyone looks like they're having the time of their lives. The message is constant and it's loud. If you're not out there doing something with someone, you're somehow falling behind. But what if the person at home on a Saturday night in a hoodie they've had since college is actually more in tune with what fulfills them than the person posting stories from a bar they didn't even want to be at? Think about that for a second. One of them knows exactly what they need. The other might still be performing and not even realize it. If any of this is hitting close to home, subscribe, because we're just getting started. There's also something happening on a chemical level that shifts this whole conversation. People who thrive in solitude tend to rely more heavily on acetylcholine than dopamine for their sense of reward. Acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter that lights up during inward-focused activity. Reading, reflecting, sitting with one thought long enough to actually follow it somewhere interesting. Their brain isn't broken because it doesn't get excited at parties. It's wired to find its high somewhere deeper, somewhere quieter. The reward system works perfectly fine. It's just tuned to a frequency most people never even think to look for. Now here's where I need to be honest with you. Because not everyone who stays home is doing it from a healthy place. For some people, those walls aren't a sanctuary. They're a place to hide. Anxiety that turns the front door into an obstacle. Depression that drains the point out of going anywhere. Trauma that taught them the outside world doesn't play fair. And for those people, staying in doesn't restore them. It quietly keeps them stuck. So the question worth asking yourself, and only you can answer it honestly, is this. Are you choosing solitude because it fills you up, or because leaving feels like it might break you? Because one of those is self-awareness. The other is something that deserves care. Not judgment, not a label, but real, honest attention. But for the ones who genuinely love their own space, who aren't running from anything, something beautiful starts to happen that the rest of the world completely misses. They start noticing things, small things, the way morning light moves across a wall, the satisfaction of a routine so personal nobody else would understand why it matters, the sound of rain when you've got nowhere to be, the feeling of an evening where nothing is planned and nothing is owed. These aren't signs of a small life. They're signs of someone paying close enough attention to find richness in what everyone else rushes past without a second glance. Psychologists call this low stimulation preference. And the people who carry it share something kind of remarkable. Their inner world is genuinely full enough to sustain them. They don't need the world to constantly provide entertainment, because what's happening in their own mind is already compelling enough on its own. They think in layers, they feel in detail, and they've quietly figured out something most people spend half their life chasing. Fulfillment doesn't need an audience. It never did. So if you're someone who cancels plans and feels zero guilt about it, who finds more energy in a solo weekend than any social event could ever give, who rewatches the same show for the 5th time because comfort isn't laziness to you, it's restoration, then let this be the last time you question yourself for it. You're not wired incorrectly. You're wired for something this world doesn't always leave room for. Substance over noise, presence over performance, depth over everything else. Tell me in the comments, are you someone who thrives at home? Or do you think we're all just making excuses for avoiding life? And if this made something click for you, the next video goes somewhere most people aren't ready for. Click it. You'll know what I mean once you're there.